because
Can?
we are muted. Yes. So, ahlan wa sahlan.
Okay. Hello and welcome to all our viewers wherever you may be. My name is MK Smith.
And I'm Bassam Haddad. Although, you passed I'm Bassam Haddad, but I remembered.
You remembered. Thank goodness. And we're both so excited to be your co-hosts for Season 2, Episode 10 of Live with ASI, A Month of Knowledge Production. We have a packed show ahead of us today with content dealing with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, pedagogy, a panel on Lebanon's upcoming parliamentary elections, a virtual reality exhibit, a new episode of the Connections podcast on Yemen's endless war, and a bundle of pieces on Palestinian political prisoners, as well as a word from a Joudah co-editor of the Arabic page.
And of course, engaging interviews with Mouin Rabbani, Bou Zeid, Bridget Guarasci, Jessica Holland, Randa Wahbe, Rabea Eghbariah, Nour Joudah, and our usual grad student corner segment with the amazing Cat Haseman.
As always, all of the content discussed today can be found in the episode digest to be published in the coming days.
So sit back, relax, and let's get to it.
All right. In late March, friend of the show, Mouin Rabbani, spoke in a panel discussion as part...
No, not good. We need to do the...
we didn't do our opening credits.
We didn't do the opening, yeah. Sorry. So, let's do it.
Okay.
So, this is basically us opening the show. So, if you want to read the last line so we can sound professional. Like, let's get to it and all that.
Let's get to it. All right. In late March, friend of the show, Mouin Rabbani, spoke in a panel discussion as part of Israel Apartheid Week at Leiden University in The Hague. He spoke about the cognitive dissonance between the way the West has responded to Russian aggression in Ukraine and Israeli aggression in Palestine, especially when it comes to boycotts. His panel contribution was transcribed and published on Joudah.
Mouin did not stop there this month. He published yet another insightful quick thoughts piece on Ukraine. In it, he answers questions by Hisham Salam regarding the response of Arab governments to the Russian invasion.
We have Mouin joining us live to dive deeper into these issues. Let's bring him in.
Bring Mouin in. Mouin? Mouin is in, but not visible. Mouin. Mouin? All right. Mouin is not with us. So, yeah. Maybe we can ask him to try again.
If at first you don't succeed.
Absolutely. There we go. Mouin, we cannot see you. He's having internet problems. He's probably calling. Is he in Holland or
I think so.
the US? These are two of the historically most advanced capitalist countries in the world.
And yet.
طيب. Let's move on for the sake of time.
Let's. All right. We're scrolling. Can you scroll?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay. Next up, we're going to talk about the 10 Years On project and their panel on Lebanon's 2022 parliamentary elections. Late last month, ASI co-sponsored an event along with the Middle East and Islamic Studies program at George Mason University, Notre Dame University,
Louaisi,
shukran, and the Asfari Institute of AUB about Lebanon's upcoming parliamentary elections.
This event was part of the collaborative project 10 Years On Mass Protests and Uprisings in the Arab World, which brought together 17 of our partners to produce resources for educators, researchers, students, and journalists to more critically understand the Arab uprisings and their various dimensions over the past decade.
The panel offered an interdisciplinary analysis of the Lebanese electoral process, with experts from a variety of fields exploring effective approaches to challenging the status quo of the current political system in Lebanon.
We are very lucky to have the event moderator Bou Zeid, who is Associate Professor and Chairperson of the Media Studies Department at Notre Dame University, Louazy, and also is Executive Director of ASI's Beirut office, to share some of the panel's insight. Let's bring Maria in. أهلا وسهلا Maria.
Hi, Maria.
Hello, Bassam. Hello, MK.
Nice to see
Welcome
you.
again to ASI's Live with ASI. That was not good.
Live with ASI. So, Maria, can you tell us a little bit about some notable insights that were gathered from this important panel?
Okay, so last week we had a panel about the Lebanese parliamentary elections that should be held potentially next May. I'm saying potentially because we still have doubts if we will be able to conduct these parliamentary elections in the midst of this chaos in the country. I would like to talk a little bit about the situation in Lebanon that led us also to think about the topic and to put it as a main item on the agenda of ASI Beirut office. So as you know, as you probably know, Lebanon is somehow, and the situation in Lebanon is so chaotic since decades, but mainly after the revolution that started in October 2019. So now Lebanon is really going through a different crises, a political crisis, an economic one, which is really unprecedented. And that's why now we're in front of a situation that is somehow that can bring hope, because the elections can bring in new faces, new blood, and hopes for change. And at the same time, we still have hopes, we still have doubts if if the ruling class will allow such change to happen, because as we also probably know that we have different situations or different factors that can make things a little bit more challenging, like the sectarian system in which we live. So we tried to have an interdisciplinary lens in this panel. This interdisciplinary lens. Why? Because we talked about the education perspective and the lack of citizenship and critical thinking, which also lead to or affect the voting behavior and the voting attitudes of Lebanese citizens in general. We talked about the media and the different narratives that now we can find them in the mainstream versus alternative media. And we also tried to have a historical perspective to argue that maybe we have this position that says we should boycott elections, and the opposition in general should not go into this, because the whole law and the whole system will not allow a real change to happen. And we also had a gender perspective, which is also important, because women in Lebanon are facing a lot of obstacles and a lot of challenges that prevent them from really from participating really and showing their potential and showing their capacities in the political sector in general. So as I was trying to describe the situation and the case, it's very complex, because we are in a vicious circle. It's a vicious circle where you have the same sectarian leaders since the Lebanese civil war that control everything. We don't know if this elections will bring somehow the change that we are aiming to have, but what we can say is that at least the dynamics after the revolution are so different. And maybe even if this parliamentary elections will not bring the whole change or the radical change that the opposition may be parties and the opposition in general in Lebanon is looking for, but at least it can break somehow, and it can some at least break, yes, the silence, and break this status quo in which we are living since decades.
Oh, I'm not muted. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I just assumed I was on mute. Thank you for that summary. I know that this is a wonderful panel for anyone who's interested in learning about the stakes of this upcoming election. And you can find it on jadalia.com, and it will also be featured in this episode's digest. Thank you so much, Maria, for joining us.
Thanks again, Maria,
Thank you.
for also being a stalwart leader in our events overseas, and we hope to have you again soon. I know that both media and Lebanon news will not run out. Shukran.
Thank
And
you.
I have to say that while I was messaging with you during the call, because we were trying to deal with a technical issue, I made jokes in the text and I saw you laughing at them. And I really enjoyed that because people thought that you were smiling at what the people were saying. And I really enjoyed that kind
You
of
always
dynamic.
bring a smile,
Ahlan,
Bassam.
ahlan,
Thank
ahlan,
you.
ahlan. Thank-
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, salam, bye.
All right, now I do believe that we have Mouin with us now. So just as a refresher, he's here to discuss two important things with us. Number one, a panel he was featured on to discuss the disparities between the West's reaction to Israeli aggression in Palestine and Russian aggression in Ukraine. And second, to discuss the latest episode of the Connections podcast, which discusses the endless war in Yemen. So
And yeah, and we should say before we introduce lovely Mouin that you are seeing us like this right now, and we look respectable. But when Maria was speaking, we were just trying to
Chaos.
move something, and the whole set fell apart.
we figured it out.
We
Yeah, I
figured it
figure it's
out.
been put back together.
Thankfully, Maria was speaking, and we were able to do this. Anyway, yalla. So,
Okay, so Mouin, can you tell us a little bit about how the Arab world has responded to the invasion of Ukraine?
Well, the conventional wisdom is that these are all U.S. client regimes, which of course they are, and that therefore they would simply fall into line in accordance with U.S. policy towards Ukraine. But what we've seen is that these states, particularly those in the Gulf, but also Egypt and others, have been hedging their bets, and that reflects the newer and transactional relationships they've developed with Russia since the end of the Cold War. On the one hand, for example, Russia is central to global energy markets in terms of being a member of the so-called OPEC Plus group that regulates supply and pricing. But also, I think that after what many of them saw the years of plenty during the Trump administration, they're now often disappointed by Washington no longer doing their bidding in terms of relations with Iran and so on. And so, what we've seen is as many of these governments doing the bare minimum, neither jumping on board with Washington and trying to project some kind of neutrality, if you will, with respect to the current war in Ukraine.
Wonderful, thank you. And now I'd love to continue to pick your brain about that and ask you to speak on the disparity between the West's reaction to the war in Ukraine and how the West treats war outside of Europe.
Well, perhaps if I tell you how that article came about, it would help explain the disparity. This was a presentation I was asked to give for Israel Apartheid Week, organized by a student group at Leiden University in the Netherlands. And as it turned out, the university administration banned the event and prohibited it from taking place on campus, in significant part on the advice of a thuggish religious fanatic who masquerades as the university's head of security, but seems to specialize in trolling pro-Palestinian faculty and students and so on. And so I looked at the disparity between how Western governments have, on the one hand, been quick to call out illegal Russian aggression in Ukraine, but at the same time seem to have limitless tolerance, if not outright support, for Israeli aggression in Palestine. And I should perhaps add that I think another very good comparison to make is between the U.S. position on, or the Western position on Ukraine, and particularly the U.S. and U.K. position on Iraq, where now with a very straight face, they're saying, "Do as I say and not as I do," and I think this reflects a much deeper imperial mindset, where Western states always see themselves as the victim, even when they're conducting aggression against entire societies in a far off continent. So, for example, if you go back and look at the Algerian War or Vietnam, it's always the British, the French, the Americans, the Dutch, who were somehow the victims of a war and occupation that they've launched on a different continent. And they see Israel also very much as the victim of Palestinian aggression, rather than the aggressor towards Palestine, the Palestinians, and indeed most of the surrounding Arab states.
Thank you so much. And finally, if I could ask you to just introduce the episode of Connections that was just published about the endless war in Yemen.
Actually, the one that was just published was on cultural heritage, and that featured Professor Haddad of the University of California.
David.
A fascinating discussion in which she looked at both attacks on cultural heritage in times of armed conflict, and also the growing efforts to protect cultural heritage and hold accountable those who violate it. But indeed, several weeks ago, I had an equally fascinating discussion with Safa Ahmed, a Saudi specialist and analyst who's also made some award-winning documentaries about the war in Yemen, and we had the opportunity to discuss various aspects of that catastrophic conflict, which again, bears very much comparison with positions that are now being taken on Russian aggression towards Ukraine by these same governments.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You're publishing so much. I can't even keep up with it all.
Yes, معين, can you please slow down بس شوي لأنه
So the rest of us have a chance to catch up. Thank you.
That's up then. Okay, great talking to you.
Are you in Amsterdam, معين?
No, I'm currently in the U.S. in New York.
أهلا وسهلا. To the land of the free.
Exactly.
طيب.
Good to see you,
Good
Mouin.
talking to you. Bye.
Bye. Take care. All right. I'm trying to. All right.
There you go.
He left before I could kick him out.
It's okay.
It took me so long.
It's all right.
All right. In late March, جدلية...
I can say that. I wasn't sure if you wanted to do.
But you were looking at me, and I thought it's my turn. But it
No,
says MK.
I was waiting for you to do the interlude.
I'm just not comfortable today.
I know. So basically, Bassam had to put on this fine sports coat, maybe? Because his shirt is a little scandalous, and we can't handle a scandal. Yeah. We can handle, like, a little scandal, but not a lot of scandal.
I'm not used to wearing stuff like this. Sorry.
Anyways, in late March, Jadalia's Palestine page released a bundle of incisive content on the topic of Palestinian political prisoners.
This bundle was initiated as part of an effort to welcome Jadalia's newest Palestine page editors, Randa Wahbe, Nour Joudah, and Rabea Eghbariah, and is dedicated to exploring the realm of Palestinian imprisonment, settler colonial carceral technologies, and resistance. The newly expanded editorial team solicited articles, reflections, and collated additional resources on the matter, such as past Jadalia articles as well as prisoners' letters. And I should say that the original team still includes Nour Ariqat, Shireen Sayali, Mouin Rabbani.
Absolutely. And we are fortunate to have these new co-editors of the Palestine page with us today to break down this bundle for us. So let us welcome them.
Yes, I think we have Rabea. I'm not sure if we have Nour yet. Can we check, Muhammad, if Nour is coming? Muhammad?
It's in the zone.
Muhammad? I know it's Ramadan, but can you respond? Uh, is Noor coming? Oh, there she is. No, Randa's here. And let me bring her in. Ahlan wa sahlan. Coming? Oh, there she is. No, Randa's here. Whoa. And Randa?
Hi.
Hi, Randa. Do you mind calling
Ahlan.
back? Do you mind closing some applications on your laptop or computer and call back? Because we have a serious echo happening.
Oh, is it better now?
Let me see. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. So, shall we wait for Noor, Muhammad, or shall we proceed? She's connecting. Noor is connecting.
In the meantime, we can start by having you both introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Especially that Noor has been part of ASI for 3 million years. Let's ask Randa and Rabea. Are we? Is this the name Rabea because of the spelling? Okay, عظيم جدا. طب Rabea and Randa, please introduce yourselves to our fans. No.
Audience.
Readership. تفضل.
Randa, go ahead.
Okay, I'll
لا
start.
بس انت جيت بالاول. لحظه انت جيت اول. Yeah, it's only fair. I mean,
I
but
agree.
it's
Go
your
ahead, Rabea.
choice. It's your choice, Rabea. If you want to move, if you want to skip, that's fine.
No, I'll jump first into the water, no problem. Hi, Noor, also. And
أهلين.
I'm Rabea Eghbariah. I was born, raised in Haifa. I just moved to the States a couple of years ago to start my doctoral studies at Harvard Law School, and I worked with Haddad Legal Center, still Haifa-based. Can you hear me? I'm
Yes,
Yes,
loud and
perfect.
clear.
Yeah, so that's me in brief. I'm curious about law, Palestine, settler colonialism, and the interactions of these three areas in particular. And I'm happy to be finally part of Jajaliyah alongside Randa and Noor, and we'll talk about it today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Randa Wahbe. I'm also a doctoral student at Harvard working in anthropology. And my research looks at carcerality in a different way. I'm looking at the way that the Israeli forces confiscate the bodies of dead Palestinians and put them in unmarked cemeteries called the Maqabir al-Arqam, the cemeteries of numbers, or in prison morgues, and don't allow their families to bury them. And I also have had the opportunity to work very closely with Palestinian political prisoners over the years. I'm currently in Ramallah, and I'm based between Ramallah, California, and Boston.
Wonderful. And Nour, if you would like to introduce yourself, please.
And let me say, before Noor introduces herself, let me just say that Noor has been a team member of this network, this organization, the Arab Studies Institute, for many, many, many years, and is credited for starting the Arab Scholars database and with help us move forward some of the projects at the Arab Studies Institute, including the Knowledge Production Project, as well as the Middle East Studies Pedagogy Initiative. And I have been extremely fortunate to have Noor in my graduate class at Georgetown University, where I had to snatch her to join us.
Yeah, well, Bassam's good at finding worker bees wherever he goes.
Did you just call me
yeah, no,
Basbous?
I called you Bassam.
Bassam, okay.
إيش في Bassam? What is going on, man?
عذرا.
Yes, I know. No, I mean, it's lovely to be back with the ASI. Obviously, you never really leave the ASI family, but it's nice to be back on a project and back with Jaddaliyah. The last project, obviously, I worked on with ASI was Status, and took some time away for doctoral work and field work. So, yeah, I'm at UCLA. I'm finishing up this year, hopefully, and working on counter mapping and indigenous sort of forms of looking at the future. and using mapping as ways to envision alternative futures and decolonized futures, looking specifically at Hawaii and Palestine and historically Algeria. So yeah, excited to be back with Jadadiya.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you all. We have a couple of questions for you.
Yes. First, can I go?
Do you want to open?
Yeah.
Tfaddali.
Okay. First, I would love if you all could tell us a little bit about what inspired this bundle on political prisoners in Palestine. If you could tell us a little bit about where you feel the discourse on political prisoners in Palestine is lacking and what gaps you're trying to fill with this bundle.
And what's all the fuss about this Palestine thing? Nour is smiling. Everybody else is like, what's wrong with this guy? Nour, you should have talked to your colleagues before this show.
I can start a little bit and then maybe Randa and Rabea can jump in. I mean, I think a lot of it came from the fact that aside from sort of the centrality of the issue in the Palestinian struggle generally, is that, you know, we joined and we sort of started talking about a potential bundle only a month or two, I think, after the prison break. And so, you know, there was obviously a lot in the news, there was a lot going on, and Rabea can speak more to this as someone who, and Randa for that matter, a bit more involved back home on these issues. So, you know, it made sense as this to be an issue that we kind of approach for a bundle, and particularly with the fact that, you know, there isn't a Palestinian family that isn't touched by this issue in some form or fashion, right? So the timing was just, I think, it was well timed, and it just made sense to kind of approach this in that way.
Yeah, I think, you know, this is an issue that's near and dear to every family, like Nour was saying. I think there were, in addition to the prison break, which was an incredible way to end an unforgettable summer for Palestinians between the war on Gaza, what was happening in Sheikh Jarrah, our freedom summer, the Unity Intifada, and then having the paradox of that, which is like the extreme repression by the PA, when a lot of Palestinians some who had been previously arrested by Israel were starting to get arrested by the PA in the wake of Nizar Banat's assassination and all the protests there. So I think the prison break, ending the summer with the prison break and seeing like the possibilities of freedom and like taking that control in your own hands was something that was incredibly inspiring for Palestinians everywhere. And at that time, there was also a lot of conversation about having a potential prisoners exchange, which we touch on in the bundle. I think something that there's been a lot that's been written about Palestinian prisoners over the years. I think it's captivated the academic scene. I think Palestinian researchers, particularly because trying to understand carcerality on our terms, trying to understand, even though we don't use the language of abolition in Palestine, trying to understand what that means. For us, I think what this bundle really tries to cover is both giving the context and the history of some of the prisoners movement with, you know, some of the visceral experiences. Like, for example, Janan Abdou's piece, who is a Palestinian lawyer, who is one of the few people that's actually able to visit Israeli prisons and to meet with the Palestinian political prisoners, wrote this incredibly fascinating piece for this bundle about meeting with two of the prisoners who had been part of the prison break and were recaptured. And she talks about some of the most intimate experiences that she has, like what it's like for a lawyer. And she's saying things like, it was even like, it wasn't raining that day, which was great, which meant that my papers weren't going to get wet. And just talking about even like the most mundane forms of humiliation that happen for the lawyers for trying to make connections between prisoners and the outside world. So I think what we were really trying to do with this bouquet of pieces is to give some of the history, like Bassel Faraj's piece, which details all of the former prisoner exchanges, and historically why they're so important, and why that tactic is continuously used even until today. And including people's experiences in the prison, or what it's like to have a relative or a family member, or even having words from prisoners themselves. We have a collection of letters from prisoners as part of the bundle, was really to try to give that holistic experience and say that this isn't just about politics, this is people's lives that we're talking about, people who are being ripped away from their families, who are being denied education, denied the ability to talk to their loved ones, to experience freedom, and we wanted to keep that central. And I think this was a great grounding way for us to start to work with Jaddali. I think it allowed us to really think about what our principles are and what we look forward to working on in the future together.
I'll just jump here a little bit to say, I mean, drawing on what just Randa and Nour were saying, I think part of the idea was to also draw visibility to this invisibilized population also within Palestine, often forgotten or marginalized also by the PA, which is its carcerality is also highlighted in this bundle, and its carceral practices that against Palestinian descent. And also, I think it is interesting to see how the carceral state is central to these settler colonial policies, not only in Palestine. So we have Tamar's piece, who also draws parallels between Palestine and elsewhere. And so I feel it is important to also highlight this, the idea behind this piece is also to draw these connections and to highlight the situation of Palestinian political prisoners. And it's also, it's a chance to mention perhaps that we have about 50% of the Israeli prisoners population in Israeli prisons are actually Palestinian, and they are ruled by a distinct legal infrastructure under the pretext of security, which not only criminalizes them but also imposes harsher treatment when it comes to Palestinian prisoners. Almost all 100% of the designated security prisoners are Palestinian. And, they suffer from total prohibition on phone calls, regular use of solitary confinement, ban on family visits, etc., prohibition on, no parole, holiday, and a ban on obtaining higher education, as Randa mentioned as well. So, we should not forget that these people live their lives, sometimes years and years, in these oppressive prisons. Just this week, and maybe Randa can explain or expand more about that experience, Majd was set free after 20 years of imprisonment under Israeli prisons. And, I saw an interview him saying, when he was about to go out, the prison services, the Israeli prison services just handed him his ID card back from 20 years ago when he was 18. He's released when he's 38 this week. And so, that was a piece of shocking. And even the currencies they handed him back were not even in use anymore. And perhaps Randa can talk a little bit more about the experience on the ground, how it feels to meet with ex-prisoners once they are set free.
Sure. I think that would be something great that we might be able to include in future editions of this ever-expanding bundle. I think I had the opportunity to be present at Majd's release because I'm close with his siblings, and it was, I think, one of the most beautiful and heartbreaking things that I have ever witnessed and experienced, to be able to see a family reunited after 20 years of not being able to hug each other, to see each other, barely be able to visit each other with all the various security measures that are so-called security measures that are taken, in which they're not allowed to visit the prisons. So just to see them together and the incredible warmth between them immediately, of course, we see a lot of prisoners' writings talking about this when they're released. It's very, it can sometimes be very overwhelming after 20 years to see what Ramallah looks like now, what Ramallah Tahta looks like now, which is where they grew up. The Ziada family was living. So I think that also is something that's shocking, but it has been an incredible experience to see that and to see how welcomed he's been back into Ramallah. And there was just like a train of visitors for the first 3 days. And it really was a unifying moment that surpassed any factions or surpassed any of these issues that we might have. And I think that's really important right now. There's about 1,000 prisoners that have sentences that are 20 years or higher, and we're starting to slowly see them being released. Majd was last Thursday. Today, Shadi al-Sharafa from Jerusalem was also released. And then quickly taken again. But I think a lot of the Second Intifada prisoners we're going to start being released, and I think that's going to change a lot of the landscape about how we talk about politics, how we see the prisoners movement. Something else that Majd said in an interview, and I think I've seen it echoed often from people who are released, is saying, like, don't forget us. Don't forget the prisoners inside. Like you said, Rabea, they are invisibilized. And like the prison system is made to invisibilize prisoners and is made to, and this neo-capitalist economies are made to make us turn away from them. And so to have them being so present, being able to talk about their experiences and to try to like bring this more to the forefront, like we're trying to do with the bundle, to really remember the heart of what this causes and what people have sacrificed.
Thank you so much, Randa and Rabea. Nour, we want to hear from you, but as you jump in, I'd like to add a quick question before we close, which is if you, what would you say in terms of the role and significance of the Palestinian political prisoners, if it has changed since Oslo, if the situation has changed?
I mean, I think one thing I'll add is that, you know, with this bundle, and Renda sort of hinted at it there at the end, or mentioned it at the end, which is that despite the fact that Palestinian prisoners and the issue touch so many of our lives, so many Palestinian lives, there is a sense of erasure that happens anytime you're talking about carcerality. And one thing, hopefully, that this bundle does is not just bringing up the issue and putting it out into the literature and publishing, but also tying it in the lived experiences of prisoners, right? Specifically, not just over theorizing and academically, but really putting their lives and their experiences at the center of the conversation. And that is something I think that does need to happen more, not only in academic literature, but in the way that we discuss these issues. And it ties a bit to your question in regards to Oslo, which is that I do think, and certainly Rabea and Randa can add to this, but I do think that, you know, since Oslo, there has been a bit of a decentralization of the prisoner issue in a way that we hadn't seen prior, but also the reality of what the situation of prisoners has become is also different, because we now have a Palestinian Authority that is also with a security apparatus and cooperation that didn't exist prior to Oslo. So it is a very different apparatus and structure than what we were dealing with in the 70s and 80s, when many of our uncles and fathers and were being imprisoned for political activism and liberation work.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. We're so excited to have the three of you joining us, or Nour returning to us, and we look forward to working together in the future and hopefully having you back on the show to discuss what I'm sure will be more important work.
Indeed. And just to let you know, everybody at Jadaliyya and ASI is very happy that this team has been infused with rising scholars like yourselves, because this is something that actually energizes us. Jadaliyya had its start in 2010. Besides myself and Sinan and Shireen and Nadia and a couple other people, a lot of the and Lisa, a lot of the people who joined the co-editorship of Jadaliya were young scholars, and they kind of made this organization what it is. So thank you all very much for all your work, and we really hope to see you in future projects, as MK shared. Salam.
Thanks, Bassam. Thanks, MK.
Thanks all.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, up next, LWA producer.
3 letters.
LWA producer Mohammed Abu Ghazala spoke with Arabic page co-editor Omar Al-Sarayreh on
Al-Sarayreh.
Sarayreh.
I cannot pronounce the R's. And
Sarayreh.
you probably don't know this family name.
I don't.
It's not very popular, it's not a recurring name. So
Ana Asifa,
between the
bas.
both of us, we really butchered Omar, sorry, Habibi.
Asifa. So the interview is a discussion of what the page has been up to in recent months. Let's take a look at what Omar had to say.
And it's significant to share that between Sinan's editorship or co-editorship of the Arabic page or Arabic section, as well as Omar Al-Sarayreh and our fantastic co-editor as well, Usama Isbir, as well as Katil Hayek and In'am hailing from Palestine 48, we have been able to resume the rate of publication and quality of publication in the Arabic section in a way that begins to rival the English sections, which is a much bigger section, just as it did many years ago. So we're very excited about that.
I don't think it begins to rival. I think it does rival.
It does rival. It does rival, absolutely. Shukran to all. And here's Omar from Amman.
Since mid-March, we started publishing translations in a dossier on African poetry. It contains a lot of poems that are translated into Arabic for the first time by Usama Isbir, one of the Arabic section editors. Also, we tried to tackle the Russian-Ukrainian war from an Arab perspective through publishing several opinion articles and more like other articles like have the more scientific approach, not just an opinion articles. We published a two-part article questioning the right and left propaganda and how it really does not mirror the political situation in Arab states. The writer Muhammad Oude suggested that we need to create our own language and terms to describe our situation and help change the status quo. Also, another article we published on Mother's Day that tried to portray the life of immigrant Syrian mothers, how they are dealing with homesickness, being separated from their families in some cases, and etc. Finally, we participated also in a bouquet of articles published by the Palestinian page here at Jadaliya regarding the situation of prisoners in occupied Palestine. Mohammed, I'd like to add just one final thing, that we are working on several articles that cover new Arabic publications. So keep in touch. Also, we will continue publishing poems in the African Poetry Dossier. And finally, we will publish a beautiful review on the productions of the Palestinian artist Big Sam, written by Sultan Al-Qaisi.
That interview.
As in, now you can say it.
Okay, thanks, Mo, for conducting that interview. So, up next, George Mason University's Middle East and Islamic Studies program held an event on a new exhibit titled Geographies of the Future, Traveling the Arab-Majority World in Virtual Reality, which experiments with virtual media to render impossible worlds possible. Artists participating in the exhibit reimagined geographies of the Arab-majority world in order to analyze political violence or to chart known landscapes in new ways.
The exhibit was curated by Jessica Holland, who is the manager of knowledge production and pedagogy at the Forum on Arab and Muslim Affairs, and Bridget Guarasci, who is assistant professor of anthropology at Franklin and Marshall College.
And in just a moment, we will be joined by both Jessica and Bridget to tell us more.
Actually, right now.
Right now?
Yeah, right now. They're ready.
Welcome both.
Ahlan wa sahlan.
Good to be with you. Thanks so much for having us.
Of course. So let's start by having you tell us a little bit about the experience of curating this exhibit.
Oh boy. Right from the beginning. Okay, so Jessica and I really had no experience curating anything. I don't know why we thought that we could possibly do this, but we went for it, and the exhibit has been just wonderful to work on, I think in large part because of the artists that are joining and have so graciously agreed to produce new works for the show. Do you want to jump in, Jessica?
Oh yeah, sure.
Jessica, we're calling from America. You don't have to be so polite. You can just jump in.
Jump in, be aggressive, be a bit more, put myself forward. Yeah, I mean, it's been a fantastic experience. I mean, partly just to get to spend loads of time virtually with Bridget, obviously, but also the experience of essentially articulating the importance of these artists and their works in the American context, primarily where we've been starting. Bridget will speak about the different locations of the show in just a moment, but essentially that's been a really rewarding and, to be honest, like life-giving process of hearing how interested people are in these issues that are applicable across internationally, essentially, things such as the environment, geographies and futurity. So I'll pass over to Bridget to give the kind of major stats of the show.
So thanks, Bassam and MK. I see you guys have the flyer from the earlier event up, which was wonderful, and I think it's still available for everyone to see. So Jessica and I were introducing the exhibit in that talk, and Geographies of the Future is a multi-sided exhibit that's going to launch in fall 2024 at Franklin and Marshall College, where I'm on the faculty at the University of Pennsylvania. And apologies, I am in Philadelphia and it is noisy outside. And also a gallery space in either Amman or Beirut, TBD. So artists in the show use virtual media to chart new geographies of the Arab majority world that don't begin and end with the nation-state moment of Sykes-Picot, but with moments of political transformation that defy hegemonic rule, such as the Abbasid-era Black slave Zanj rebellion against Basrawi landowners, or Dido's journey across the Mediterranean and its imagined connections to Drexia, the mythological underwater city of drowned Middle Passage slaves who adapt to a new life undersea by learning to breathe underwater and absorb salt.
And so some other works in the show, like Palestine Open Maps, locate Palestine by cross-referencing the survey of Western Palestine from 1870 with British Mandate era maps of Palestine from the 30s and the 40s with the contemporary map of Israel-Palestine to show in detail the development of the settler colonial project. For example, where once there was an ancestral farmland, today there's a biodiversity conservation site. And all over the map is populated with an oral history archive of video interviews with Nakba refugees compiled in partnership with the American University of Beirut.
So together, in sum, artists use virtual media to imagine a future of transnational connection that's also historically grounded, while at the same time pushing virtual technologies toward the political, toward history, and toward embodied, sentient, and effective experiences that are the essence of life.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead, Jessica.
And we have the announcement for the March for the April 14th event up, if you want to refer to it.
Yes, yeah. So fantastic. So what I thought would be good to say is that who are these artists that are going to come speak at ASI on the 14th? Well, basically it's Ala Yunus, Majda Shahabi and Ahmed Barkley, Alias and Ahmed Samadin, Arish Haniti and Eliza Godox, and finally Barish Dorusas. And basically each of these artists is going to be speaking about their individual works or their kind of collective practice for this show. On Thursday, April 14th at noon EST, 5 p.m. London and 7 p.m. in Beirut. And that'll be like this live on Jadalia's Facebook page. And essentially, why should you tune in to listen to
Should
these
we
artists?
do the script for the...
Sorry, MK, did you want to jump in? I'm at cross purposes.
Sorry, that was an error on our part. Please continue.
No worries. So I just finally say that so each of the artists or collectives will be speaking about the role that research plays in their practice, how their work makes an intervention in the public perception of geography, and also how their art imagines alternate futures for the Mediterranean, Southwest Asia, North Africa, or generally the Middle East. The artists will speak about how the show brings together these different examples of futures that cross nation-state boundaries and that are intrinsically linked to resistant movements across the global south. So I hope that's maybe given your audience or your readership, as MK was referring to earlier, some reasons to tune in on April 14th at noon EST.
And we are happy to say that Georgetown University has joined through the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies and co-sponsoring this event and project. So we are very excited. We're also trying together with these fantastic curators to expand co-sponsorship so that we could exhibit, feature, and present this project in as many research centers and universities worldwide.
Thank you both so much for joining us. We look forward to hopefully having you back to discuss this next upcoming event.
Perfect.
Wonderful. We'll have a wonderful day, both of you.
You too. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. All right. And what would an LWA episode be without another great episode of the Connections podcast, which we know Mouin touched on earlier, but we want to take a deeper dive. So this time around, Mouin Rabbani interviewed journalist and award-winning filmmaker Safa Al-Ahmed on the war in Yemen, its regional dimensions, and ongoing humanitarian catastrophe in the country. Their conversation focused on Al-Ahmed's work about the war in Yemen and its staggering human toll.
My doctor said I should breathe several times a day. Unfortunately, Safa wasn't able to make it to the show today, but you will find her conversation with Mouin linked in this episode's digest, so be sure to take a look. It will also be, if you want to just go to it right now, it will be on Jadalia, and it will be very close to the top of the page.
Wonderful. Next up, we're going to talk about pedagogy. First up, with regards to pedagogy, the MESPI team curated a bouquet of peer-reviewed articles published between 2010 and 2020 that all place the Arab uprisings into conversations on theory and temporality. You can find these resources at mespi.org. The resource is titled Comparative Perspectives on the Arab Uprisings in Peer-Reviewed Articles 2010 to 2020, Theoretical and Temporal Lenses.
The 10 Years On Project module on the MESPI website is fully operational and ready for dissemination. This module contains all of the events, signature panels, books, essential readings, publishers, collections, and peer-reviewed articles focused or produced as part of the 10 Years On Project's mission of interrogating the Arab uprisings and their aftermath, including the literature on the Arab uprisings. Be sure to check it out at mespi.org, and once you're on there, you can go under projects, 10 years on, and you can have access to all of this material, in addition to new material that we are publishing based on the panels and the papers that have been produced from these panels. So it is an ongoing project. We had said that it's a year-long project, which it is, except that it kind of overflowed into spring 2022 as a result of the energy and excitement and readiness for a lot of people, scholars, research centers to produce knowledge on this topic.
Yes, so this is definitely a one-stop shop for anyone interested in the Arab uprisings, whether it be in research or just general knowledge. Now it's time to welcome Cat Haseman for the Grad Student Corner. What have you got for us today, Cat?
Hi, Cat.
Oh, you're muted.
Hi.
There we go.
So sad I couldn't make it to the studio today. Am I?
No, now you're good.
Still?
We hear you now. We hear you now.
There's a delay. There's a bit of a delay though. So after you say something, pause for a second and say it again so it matches. Yeah. No, go ahead. We can't do much about this.
Sounds good. That's fine. Yeah. Well, today for the Grad Student Corner, I am going to co-opt a different segment of the show and make it my own. Normally you hear co-hosts Bassam and MK talk about our must-read articles of the month from Jadaliyya, but I am going to talk about 3 of those today, and I am going to direct those specifically to grad students. I have been sort of reviewing what's on JAD this month, and I think these are the 3 pieces you got to check out. So first, we have a piece by co-editor of the Jadaliyya Maghrib page, Mariam Hala-Davis. She wrote an analytical piece in response to French President Macron's speech about the 60th anniversary of the Evian Accords, which were between the French state and the Algerian FLN. And in the piece, she argues that Macron just pays lip service to the idea of reconciliation, but has not addressed any of the root issues that have made France less democratic and less egalitarian, as well as more Islamophobic. Make sure you check out that one. All of these, of course, will be listed in the episode digest. So second, we have a piece by Alex Chaplin titled Strategies of Power and the Emergence of Hybrid Mini-Grids in Lebanon. So very different from the first piece I've recommended, but it's always good to expand your horizons. And this piece analyzes how households, businesses, and cities in Lebanon have stopped relying on the failed national grid and have found alternative modes of electricity. So in the article, Chaplin discusses how the necessity of finding alternate sources of electricity has bred a novel decentralized organizational model in Lebanon. And last, you can see here on the screen is a piece by Mouin Rabbani, and it's an interview with Randa Wahbe. It's a quick thoughts piece, so it takes the form of an interview. And so it's very easy to follow on a more complicated topic if you're not as familiar with the controversy that has ensued in Holland, where the Dutch government has acquired an Israeli wiretapping system for its police forces. So the two have a very insightful back and forth about the controversy of what it means to outsource wiretapping operations to a foreign company, and about the story's wider implications across Europe. So those are the 3 pieces that all of you grad students out there should make time to read this week or in the coming month, depending on your schedules. So you can find the links to all of those in the digest of this episode, which will be posted on Jadaliyya in the next few days. Thank you all so much, and that's all I got for the Grad Student Corner this month.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kat.
Thank you so much, Kat.
Insightful as always.
And what did she?
Oh, she left.
Kat,
Bye, Kat.
Bye, Kat. I was gonna say nice things about you, like how awesome you are and how consistent your segments have been, and how people actually, like it that you are sharing what is relevant, especially most relevant, of course, to graduate students. But you left us in the dark.
Now, do you see what it says on the script right now?
Transmission. Okay. I was yelled at. Okay, here's an interlude.
Okay.
And now the interlude is over.
We have.
I was yelled at because I didn't do the interlude so that we can rest. Even though the interlude is like 2 seconds, I can barely have one breath.
Okay, we have a couple of new texts out now for you to check out.
First up is Hisham Bustani's collection of short stories titled The Monotonous Chaos of Existence. This book has been translated brilliantly by Maya Tabit, and it contains a variety narratives. What?
Variety of.
That's a typo. I apologize, everyone. It contains a variety of narrative styles and topics, which illustrates the impossibility of pinning down the contemporary Arab world. Themes range from personal to political.
Next is Psychoanalysis Under Occupation by Laura Sheehy and Stefan Sheehy. The book surveys how Palestinian psychoanalytical clinicians see their own practice as a form of resistance to settler colonial violence. You can find links to both these Newton interviews in the episode digest.
And shout out to Stefan Sheehy, who is a friend of ours and a friend of the network that we're part of. So, ahlan wa sahlan, Stefan. Stefan Sheeha.
Okay, so now we have 2 announcements before we part with you today. First, we want to announce that the Arab Studies Institute is now accepting internship applications for spring of 2022. You can apply today for a number of positions with ASI's various branches, such as the Arab Studies Journal, Jadaliyya, Quilting Point, the Forum on Arab and Muslim Affairs, and Tadween Publishing.
You can apply for a general internship. By the way, this is the last time I will do this because I have equipment here and I have to bend every time. So next time I think I'm going to get a boom arm.
Okay.
You can apply for a general internship or for specific positions, which you can find in the call for interns linked in this episode's digest. All internship positions are virtual unless stated otherwise.
Applications are now being reviewed on a rolling basis, so apply today. And one last thing before we depart for the day. Bassam, if you want to put this up on the big screen, we want to announce that on Thursday, April 7th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, there will be an important discussion entitled The Political Ethics of Sanctions, Lessons from Iran and Iraq. This will be hosted by 2 of the co-editors of Jadaliyya's Iran page, Negar Razavi and Naveed Mansouri.
Perfect. And that wraps up our show today, covering a month of knowledge production in March. Be sure to find all the content we discussed today in the episode digest, which will be up on Jadaliyya in the coming days. And I feel very embarrassed that I stole MK's line. Can you just say my line now?
Thank you all and see you next month.
Assalamu alaikum.